Hi, I'm JMaxKiss and welcome to another episode of TLDR. Now before we begin, let me just give a big thank you to everyone who watched, subscribed, and left comments on the previous video. It really helps ignite that spark inside me to keep going. So let me just do a few changes based on your comments before we begin.
Three hours later.
Now we come to a point in time which changes the entire multiverse forever. This is in fact the last time we get a really good look at Dominaria before we arrive there again in the next set with the Gatewatch. So this great multiverse changing event is called the Mending, aka the Great Mending. So if we are to use a sewing machine as a reference, the machine would be made up of all these people. Yep. That's Nikki B, God Pharaoh, God Emperor, the tailor himself. And these pair of jeans were what a young Dominaria looked like. Now, if you go and put a bunch of fighting street cats on these jeans, they probably would end up looking like this. This is what Dominaria turned into after thousands of years of various cataclysmic events, except it wasn't a fashion trend. Remember in the last video when Nicobolus took on Leviathan? That caused something called a rift. This rift was the first to appear in Dominaria at Madara near the Talon Gates, aka the Leviathan remains. A rift destabilizes the fabric of the multiverse and were distortions of both time and space. Now most planeswalkers that went near them would lose consciousness or be dazed and confused, having glimpsed upon the pain and realities that lie within and beyond the rifts. These rifts even made planeswalking harder. Now, how come Urza or the other planeswalkers never dealt with these rifts? Well, the fact was that the plane was not beyond self-repair until the most major of rifts happened after Urza, and that was the birth and destruction of a certain someone who we will find out about later. Now, Teferi, enter stage right, having phased in from Urza's time, saw how much of a problem the rifts were and had to be dealt with, and so he set out to close them with some help of other people. Now, 8 major rifts were open at the time, and to close rifts were very difficult, usually involving some sort of sacrifice. So I will briefly explain these 8 rifts in the order of their creation. The Madaran rift was closed by Nicobolus, using a planeswalker's life as a sacrifice named Leshrac, who had tried to kill Bolus. The Yavamayan rift was caused by Urza, and was closed by a planeswalker named Jeska. Now, Jeska didn't do this of her own free will. She was actually influenced by Leshrac, the guy that got sacrificed by Bolus. So Jeska closed it with the help of a person named Raha. Now, Radha had a latent spark inside of her, and she used that as a sacrifice, so she would never become a planeswalker in order to close this rift. The Talarian rift was caused by Urza, because he's a jerk and didn't care about his consequences, and was closed by Karn through time travel. The Shivan rift and the Zhalfir rifts were caused by Teferi, just as guilty as Urza, by phasing out the 2 areas of Shiv and Zhalfir to avoid Phyrexian destruction. Now Teferi sacrificed his own spark to close the Shivan rift and bring back Shiv. The Zhalfirian rift was closed by Leshrac influencing Jeska again, who tried to use Radha, but Radha didn't have her latent spark anymore. So since there was no sacrifice made, when the rift closed, Zhalfir was lost forever. The Urborg rift was actually not made by a planeswalker, but by Phyrexian invasion known as the Wrathy Overlay. It was closed by a cat dude named Lord Ringrace, who used his own life to seal it. The Sky Shroud rift was also a result of the Wrathy Overlay, and was closed by a half-elf named Freyalize, sacrificing her own life in order to close it. Now we have the last rift, the biggest and baddest rifts of them all, the Otarian rift. Now, Otaria is a place where Jeska is from, and she has a rather complicated past, but I will try and sum it up for you as best as I can. Now, Jessica ended up being stabbed by her brother because he was under the influence of this material in his sword that pretty much made him do it because he was out of his mind. So once he stabbed her, he realized what he had done and snapped out of it and went to go get her help. Now, in getting this help, she ended up becoming Phage the Untouchable. When she became Phage, she possessed a curse that anything she touched would rot except inorganic materials and silk. Hence her outfit. She participated in pit fights for the Cabal, basically a tribe of barbarians, and she killed a woman named Nivea, who was wife to a wizard named Ixidor, who made the angel Akroma. Now, Ixidor made Akroma by sacrificing his right arm and was made for the purpose of avenging his wife. Akroma went and hunted Jessica down to a sanctum, who had a leader named Zagorka. Now, Jessica had a brother named Kamal who had stabbed her before, and he killed all 3 of the women with a weapon called the Soul Reaper. When this happened, all 3 women blended into one creation known as Corona, goddess of magic. Now, Corona ended up being killed by a couple of unmen later who betrayed her, and she died. When she died, the 3 women who made up Corona separated and were dead except for Jessica, who had her spark awakened and became a planeswalker. She traveled around for a bit, came back wanting to do something about these rifts. When it came to this last Otarian rift, Jessica felt up to the challenge because it was tied personally to her and was helped by Radha and Venser. So she was teleported inside the heart of this rift and faced off against an image of Corona. She charged at Corona, dispersed all her planeswalker essence into the rift, and even those rifts and fissures beyond Otaria. Jessica had sacrificed herself to close all the rifts everywhere and began the Great Mending. As a result of the mending, all planeswalker sparks everywhere were forever changed into much weaker versions of what existed. So where once existed immortality and immense godlike powers, now existed much weaker powers and mortality. There you have it, fellow Vorthos, the Mending in a nutshell. Hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, share, and comment below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more TLDR.